Chapter 7. The Winter of Paranoia. As 1780 approached, the war became a game of shadows. Washington was camped in New Windsor, his army shivering and hungry. He was obsessed with the Culper Ring's reports. He knew that without them, he was fighting a giant while blindfolded. But the British were getting smarter. A new intelligence officer, Colonel John Simcoe of the Queen's Rangers, began to suspect that the Setauket farmers were more than they seemed. He turned Setauket into a garrison, quartering soldiers in the homes of the citizens. Abraham Woodhull found himself sharing his own house with the men he was spying on. He had to write his reports in the middle of the night, huddled under a blanket by the light of a single dying ember, listening to the snoring of British soldiers in the next room. Every creak of a floorboard felt like a death knell. The pressure began to break him. "I am watched with such a jealous eye," he wrote to Talmadge, "that I am practically a prisoner in my own home." Yet the messages didn't stop, because in Manhattan, Robert Townsend had just discovered something that would change the course of the war forever. He had overheard a conversation at a coffee house about a great plot, a plan to capture the Hudson River and split the colonies in two. The conspiracy involved a secret correspondence with a Mr. Anderson. Townsend knew that Mr. Anderson was the code name for John Andre. But who was Andre talking to on the American side? Chapter 8. The Viper in the Nest. The great plot Robert Townsend overheard in the smoke-filled coffee houses of Manhattan was more than just talk. It was a dagger aimed at the heart of the American cause. For months, General Benedict Arnold, once the hero of Saratoga and one of Washington's most aggressive commanders, had been nursing wounds, both physical and emotional. Feeling slighted by Congress and drowning in debt, the eagle of the Revolution had turned into its most dangerous predator. In the late summer of 1780, Arnold secured command of West Point, the formidable fortress overlooking the Hudson River. To the Americans, it was the Gibraltar of the North. To Arnold, it was a bargaining chip worth £20,000 and a brigadier's commission in the British Army. From his shop in New York, Townsend sent a frantic, invisible warning. A high-ranking officer is in contact with Andre. The Hudson is the prize. But Washington, despite his brilliance, could not bring himself to suspect his most courageous general. He received the reports, but found the idea of Arnold's betrayal unthinkable. The Culper Ring had provided the thread of truth, but the needle was moving too fast for the Continental Command to stitch the warning together in time. Chapter 9. The Boot of the Major. On the night of September 21, 1780, the conspiracy moved from letters to flesh. Major John Andre, the dashing head of British intelligence, stepped off the HMS Vulture and onto the dark shores of the Hudson. He met Arnold in a thicket of trees where they finalized the surrender of West Point. Fate intervened when American shore batteries fired on the Vulture, forcing the ship to retreat and leaving Andre stranded behind enemy lines. Forced to travel by land in civilian clothes, Andre carried the evidence of the crime hidden inside his stockings, 6 pages of Arnold's handwriting detailing the fort's weaknesses. As Andre neared the British lines at Tarrytown, he was stopped by 3 local militiamen. Thinking they were loyalists, Andre made the fatal mistake of identifying himself as a British officer. When the men searched him, they found the papers in his boots. Back in New Windsor, Washington was arriving at Arnold's headquarters for a scheduled breakfast just as the news of Andre's capture broke. Arnold fled mere minutes before Washington entered his room, leaving his wife, Peggy Shippen, to feign madness to cover his escape. Washington, holding the papers found in André's boot, looked at his aides with tears in his eyes and asked, "Whom can we trust now?" Chapter 10. The Kidnap Plot and the Gallows. The escape of Benedict Arnold was a bitter pill for Washington. He wanted the traitor to pay, not for vengeance, but to show the world that the invisible thread of American resolve could not be severed by one man's greed. While John André was being held for trial, Washington authorized a daring, top-secret mission. He turned to the Culper Ring and a sergeant named John Champ. The plan was for Champ to desert the Continental Army, flee to British-occupied New York, and join Arnold's newly formed American Legion. Once inside Arnold's inner circle, Champ was to kidnap him and spirit him across the river to face a court-martial. For weeks, Champ lived the life of a double agent, working alongside the man he intended to abduct. However, on the very night the kidnapping was to take place, Arnold moved his quarters and the mission failed. Meanwhile, the tragedy of the Game of Shadows reached its climax. On October 2, 1780, Major John André was led to the gallows. He was respected by both sides for his bravery, but under the laws of war, he was a spy. As he stood on the cart, he adjusted the noose himself, a gentleman to the end. The Culper Ring had successfully exposed the treason, but the cost was the death of a man who had played the same game they did, just for the other side. The ring had saved West Point, but the war was far from over. The British were now paranoid, hunting for the ghosts who had ruined their great plot.